Hello, this is Blair Stanislao with the Happy Lion Center. Welcome to our podcast, Mystical and Infamous, where we have playful and easy conversations about anything mystical, getting to the heart of all things strange and weird. Join us in a bit of magical tomfoolery, spreading the alchemy of love and light. And now, we invite you to enjoy the show.
About 35 years ago or so, 33 or 34 years ago, I was facing a horrible moment in my life, Blair, all kidding aside. I had been hit by what I call the triple whammy. I lost my relationship, I lost my job, and I lost my health, all within the same 10-day period. My wife and I, it wasn't an angry departure. We just agreed it wasn't working. So we came to an agreeable decision just to part company. So it wasn't filled with anger, but it was sad for me because we had two children, and I didn't really want the relationship to end. But I thought, okay, I can move forward. And Blair, 5 days later, I was laid off from my job. The corporation I worked for was downsizing, and I had the least amount of seniority. I was the last person in, first person out. But, my boss said, we hate to lose you because you're really, really good at what you do. So we're going to give you at least we're going to give you a really glowing letter of recommendation that you can take to other employers, which I thought, okay, fair enough. So now I'm driving to an interview for a new job. I'm certain I'm going to get it because I've got all the qualifications and I'm holding this glowing letter of recommendation. So, they're going to hire me. I never got there. An older gentleman in his car made a left turn in front of my car as I was driving down the road, smashed right into my car. He misjudged the distance between our two cars, and he totaled my car. It was just an accordion of nothing but mashed up metal. And I broke my neck in the car accident. Of course, they rushed me to the hospital, and I didn't have a hairline fracture. I can still remember the words on the report. It said I had suffered a 3/4 inch avulsion fracture of the 7th cervical vertebrae posteriorly. In other words,
7 vertebrae or the 7th one?
The 7th vertical vertebrae posteriorly, my neck. Mm-hmm. But it was a break in my neck large enough to put a pencil through. We're not talking about a hairline fracture. Now, when I woke up in the emergency room, there was a doctor leaning over my table, and he said, "Young man, you have no right to be here." He said, "I've seen this kind of accident before, and people who suffer this serious of an injury to the neck, to the spinal cord, very often die because of spinal cord complications. And if they don't die, at the very least, they're paralyzed from the neck down. You have escaped both outcomes." And he looked at me and he said, "What do you intend to do with the rest of your life? Because you've been given a great gift." I never thought about it in that way, but now I finally found an apartment, which I really, wasn't happy about having to live in, but it was just a small little one-room studio. It's a temporary, location. But I couldn't pay the rent, Blair. I couldn't pay the rent. I had no job, and nobody would hire me. Now I was going to job interviews, but now because I'm wearing this I had a therapeutic collar that I'm wearing. They call it in the business. They call it a Philadelphia collar. You can look it up online. It's a device. It's a plastic collar that holds up your head. Yeah. And the doctor said, "You may not take this collar off. I don't care what you're doing."
Yeah.
Even if you're sleeping or taking a shower, you will not take this collar off because it's holding your head up.
Yeah.
Because right now we have to wait until your neck fuses, again, sufficiently to hold up your head. So nobody would hire me and finally, after 7 interviews, one guy said to me, Mr. Walsh, I got to be honest with you. We'd hire you in 30 seconds with your qualifications if you weren't wearing that therapeutic device around your neck. But with that kind of injury, if you're still not healed, one wrong move on the job with us, and we're paying your medical bills for the next 14 years. We can't come back to us when you're fully healed. So nobody would hire me. Mm. Finally, my landlord said to me after about 3 months of this, Mr. Walsh, we can't continue to carry you this way. We have to ask you to leave. And I was evicted from my apartment. Blair, I wound up living on the sidewalk. I thought, okay, I can do this for a couple of bad weeks or a month until I find something. I was out there for a year of my life. 1 year living on the street. Try it sometime. Try it for a weekend. Mm-hmm. Go out for a weekend without a nickel in your pocket and with only the clothes on your back, and tell me on Monday morning how you did. Mm-hmm. Then do that for a year, which I experienced. I finally found a little part-time job somewhere. Enough to pay the rent on a small little place. And I woke up in my little place one morning after being there about 3 weeks, just so angry with God. Because, I'd been a good person in my life. I didn't obey all the rules, fair enough, but I was a nice person. I didn't try to cheat anybody or hurt anybody. And I thought, okay, what have I done to deserve a life of such endless struggle, one thing after the other? Somebody tell me the rules. I'll play. Just give me the rule book. Well, how does this work? And I saw a tablet on the coffee table in front of me. It was a legal pad that I was writing my lists of things I wanted to get. And so I wrote an angry letter to God. Dear God, tell me what I don't understand here. There's clearly something I don't understand. And I was really angry. I'm writing an angry letter. Of course, it's just quasi-therapeutic device. I didn't obviously expect to hear back. But Blair, I began hearing what I call a voiceless voice. It's like the sound of one's own thoughts. But I began hearing messages in my mind. Neale, relax. It's going to be all okay. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'd sure as hell like to know the answers to my questions. Yeah. And the voice said, you are sure as hell about a lot of things, but wouldn't you rather be sure as heaven? And I'm writing, okay, what's that supposed to mean? I realized I'm just really talking to myself, basically, but then I began receiving answers, Blair, to every question I asked. And I began asking other questions because the process was astonishing me. So I ultimately asked questions really about everything. Mm-hmm. Life, right livelihood, sexuality, human relationships, health, diet. I asked questions about parenting, about really everything. And I received, but in my opinion, what were to me incredible answers to every question I asked. I thought, this is unbelievable. What's going on? This went on for weeks, several weeks. Every morning I would wake up at 4:30 in the morning or so, 4:23 in the morning, and I would just wake up for no apparent reason. So I thought, okay, fair enough. Whatever's going on wants me to continue, so I'd go back to my legal pad, And I was still going to my part-time job, which was okay. It was, at least I could afford my little flat. Couldn't afford much else, but I could at least afford to be off the street. And you know what was nifty about my little flat? It actually had a bathroom. Oh. You don't think about things until you're on the street for a year. There's no place. You have to sneak into restaurants or go to try to find a public toilet someplace.
Mm-hmm.
Not an easy thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So you go into a restaurant and the manager would come up to you and say, "Oh, come on. Don't come in here. Don't come in here." I said, please. I won't bother anybody. I won't talk to any customers. I just need to use the bathroom. Finally, one manager of a McDonald's looked at me and he said, "Okay, fair enough. You can come in here whenever you need to. Just don't panhandle the customers." I said, "It's a deal." And we shook hands.
Yeah.
And I had a place to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
For the last half of my time on the road. So that's my long story. But then I began, as I said, receiving these, at the very least, I would call them interesting answers to the questions that I was asking. And at one point, this voice in my mind said to me, "Neale, you're going to make of this a book, and it will be read, accessed by many people." And I thought to myself, that's not going to happen. Nobody's going to, for one thing, nobody's going to publish a book because a guy says, he's having a conversation with God. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I could just see, in my mind's eye, I was thinking, I could just see the publisher rushing out to the workroom floor, saying to all of his editors, "Hold the presses. I got a guy here who's talking to God." It's not going to happen. Nobody's going to do that. So you know what I did? I went to his Xerox place where I could, for like 12 cents in those days, 10 or 12 cents a page, and I copied my handwritten notes and sent them off to a couple of publishers. Blair, 4 or 5 weeks later, my phone rang. And it was a guy who said, I'm from Hampton Roads Publishing Company. We'd like to publish your book. I said, "Are you kidding me? You're going to publish my handwritten notes?" He said, "Well, my people read it, and they think it's a wonderful book of fiction that people will really relate to." I said, whoa, wait a minute. This is not a book of fiction. You're not going to publish this as a fiction book. And he said to me, "Mr. Walsh, you trying to tell me you think this actually happened to you?" I said, "Not only did it actually happen, you're holding a record of it. This is precisely what occurred. I asked questions, and these are the answers I was given." He said, "Well, okay, we'll publish it as a nonfiction book because it's interesting stuff, fair enough, but it's not going to find 500 readers. I mean, people aren't going to buy a book because the guy claims that God is talking to him directly. It's not going to happen. Like you're not the Pope or the Archbishop of Canterbury or the head ulama or the chief rabbi."
Remind me what year this was.
1993.
Okay.
1992, something like that.
Okay.
So the book was finally published. I recall the publication date because it was so symmetrical. It was published 5/5/95.
Okay.
But this conversation took place about a year and a half or two before that. Mm-hmm. It takes a while to get a book published. So, and he was right, by the way. The publisher hit the nail on the head. The book did not find 500 readers. It found 5 million.
Yeah.
I'm not bragging, just saying.
Yeah. Well, how long did that take for it to go?
Well, I remember they called me back about 6 weeks or 7 weeks after the book came out.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "Something crazy is going on here. We've already sold 500,000 copies."
So here's another question I have for you.
I said to the publisher, "Wait a minute, are you kidding me? Are you telling me you sold 500,000 copies in 6 or 7 weeks?" He said, we don't know. The book is just taking off." So what was happening was that people were handing it to other people or sharing it with their relatives or, people that they wanted to, and they said, you got to read this book. You got to read this book. And so people were buying it like hotcakes.
Yeah. So I'm curious, did you also get the title name? Or how did you come across the title?
Oh, no, that was my experience. I
Okay.
called it
So
Conversations with
you
God.
knew the title. Yeah. Okay.
I called it Conversations with God from the very beginning. I
Okay.
said when I sent it to the publisher, "Hey, I'm having conversations with God, and this is my copy, my handwritten notes from my conversations with God."
Yeah.
So of course they called the book Conversations with God.
Well, I greatly and I wanted to, because I had this opportunity, I wanted to tell you how much I appreciated that title. I actually graduated just after high school, just after the book got published. And I had no clue about that book for quite a while. And it actually wasn't even until it had to have been, I don't really know, definitely in the 2000s, that I came across your book. And I read it and I understood it and I felt it and I connected with it, but I didn't know what to make of it quite yet. But as I have evolved through this process, the thing that I appreciate the most about it is that was a bridge for me because I had structures in my mind. I grew up in the South. And so I grew up a Christian, right? I would say. And so I'm very familiar with church and the term God and so forth. And so that title was like, oh, that sounds really cool. I'd be interested in that, And then on top of that, the way that you presented it or the way that it came through, not only was it incredibly authentic, but it surpassed any of the superficial human experiences that I had had, even through religion, even through any kind of church that I had gone through. It was like the conversation that was in the book was more authentic than going on Sunday, if that makes sense, because going on Sunday would involve interacting with other people in a specific way that was socially acceptable and all that, whereas you're right in the book and you're right at the core of it. So I appreciated that. And for me, it was a bridge that opened the door to say, hey, this can happen and it can happen this way, but that doesn't mean that's the only way it can happen. Because what I saw in that book, I can see in other ways.
Where in the Deep South did you live?
North Florida.
Oh, because I wound up spending some time in Spartanburg, South Carolina.
Oh, my oldest sister went to college there.
No kidding.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, okay, that's two people who know about Spartanburg, South Carolina. I was on the radio there. I worked at the radio station WORD in Spartanburg, South Carolina.
Yeah.
So I know all about the Deep South and some of their points of view, not only about God, but about people of different skin color. And I was having a really hard time getting accustomed to what I was hearing on the street and in restaurants and so forth. I remember going to a gas station in Spartanburg. Now, when we're talking about 1963, not recently, but still.
Yeah.
It's 1963 or 1965, and I'm in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And the guy ahead of me was a black man bringing his car in to get gas. And they told him he had to go around back. They said, no, we don't serve you here. Mm-hmm. There is a gas pump around the back if you want to get some gas up there. And I thought, so he drove around, and I said to the guy at the gas station, why did you give him any gas? He said, we don't serve black people up front.
Yeah.
That's a true story from my life.
Oh, no, I don't doubt that. I grew up there. I heard all kinds of stories. Through the years, I've recognized that I could not have been born a second earlier to tolerate similar things. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway, that's my little side story.
Yeah.
But here we are. How can I serve you?
Well, I just would like to ask a couple of questions. So one of the things that I'm really curious about is this path that I have taken for me has led me into all different kinds of energy healing and so forth. And your book is what people would now commonly call, and I think there's a lot more accessibility for people out there to understand what this is. Whereas years ago, like even honestly, even in the 90s, definitely, but even worse before that, this idea of channeling and what you did would be considered something called automatic writing. And it's just a way of connecting to source, and you ask the question and you get the answer. Have you have you experienced other people who channel in different ways? What is your thought process on that?
First of all, I tell people I did not channel.
Okay.
Channeling is a term that's understood to mean, at least as the word is used in the vernacular. Most people, when they talk about channeling, they talk about a person whose body has been taken over temporarily by some other being, who's then speaking through them. Mm-hmm. That's what most people mean when they say channeling, and that's not at all what happened to me. It's also not automatic writing. I didn't put my pen to paper and all of a sudden it was just moving on its own.
Yeah, actually.
So it wasn't channeling or automatic writing any more than, dare I say it, any more than Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John would be called channelers.
Yeah.
Or that they were involved with automatic writing. They simply, all that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John did was write down what they heard, what they were told. Mm-hmm. They were just simply, in a sense, taking dictation.
Yeah.
And that's all I did. So when people ask me how would I describe my experience, I say, it's very much like taking dictation. I would simply ask a question and then write down the answer that I was hearing in my mind. But it wasn't automatic writing, and it wasn't channeling.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a common understanding of the word channeling. I do think that education about what channeling really is actually expanding, and there's more information out there.
Wonderful. I'm glad to know that.
Yeah, but channeling as a whole, just as a generic term, is not really only what you were describing there. That is a form of channeling, but it's not the only way you can do it. And so that is one of the methods, is to literally you turn around and you don't physically turn around. You weren't turning around looking behind you to get the answer, right? You were asking the question and then you were getting the answer. And that is a method of channeling information. But all channeling is referring to is really just connecting to source, right? Connecting to God, as some people call it, right? So
if that's the new definition of channeling, fair enough. That's not what channeling meant when I was your age.
Oh, definitely not, I'm sure. Yeah. So what has been your biggest takeaway from all of this experience since you started getting the conversations with God down on paper? What has been the biggest shift for you? And where do you see humanity actually shifting as a whole?
Well, the biggest shift for me, by the way, I'm going to get a bumper sticker made next week. Shift happens.
Yeah.
The biggest shift for me was in my understanding of who I am, why I'm here, what I'm doing on the planet, what is the point of this physical experience that we call life. And when that shift took place, when I came to understand, oh, I'm not this. Oh, I get it. This is not who I am. This is just simply something I have.
Yeah.
And this is not even who I am. I'm not even my mind. Mm-hmm. This is also something I have. These are pieces of equipment. Mm-hmm. They're tools that are being used by who I really am.
Yeah.
And so I've come to understand that who I really am is a spiritual entity. I'm a spiritual being that some people call a soul. I'm a soul with a body and a mind. But the shift that occurred in my life was, for the first 25 years of my adult life, I focused all of my attention on how I could help this and this get ahead in the world. I wanted, the cultural story I grew up in, cultural agenda, that when I was 18 years old was get the car, get the girl, get the job,
Yeah.
get the better car, get the better job, get the better girl, get the spouse, get the kids, get the house, get the better spouse, get the grandkids, get the office in the corner with your name on the door, get the building on the corner with your name on the building. And then ultimately get the gray hair, get the retirement watch, get the cruise tickets, get the illness, and get the hell out.
Yeah.
And that was the agenda that my culture had placed in front of me. Everywhere I looked, that was basically the cultural story in one form or another. But when I received the information that I received in conversations with God, no, Neale, your life has nothing to do with you. Your life is about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. And when you understand that, my son, you will realize that in the universal sense, your life is about you for an elegant reason. There's only one of us in the room. There's nobody else here but another version of you that looks a little different. So when I understood that, what you do for another, you do for yourself. And what you fail to do for another, you fail to do for yourself. I thought, well, it seems like I've heard that somewhere before. I wonder where something like that. Didn't this guy say that about 2,000 years ago? Do unto others as you would have it done unto you. That was the golden rule. Then I was told about the platinum rule. Platinum being even more valuable than gold. Mm-hmm. So the golden rule, do unto others as you would have it done unto you, has now become, in my mind, the platinum rule. Do unto others as they would have it done unto them. Which changed everything in my agenda. It changed how I treated all people of all races, of all religions, of all sexual orientations, of all income levels. I started treating other people as if they were another version of me. And of course, what I was told that I am is, dare I say it, an individuation of divinity. Mm-hmm. Because I said to God, who am I? What am I? I don't understand. What's going on? What am I? God said, sweetheart, you're an individuation of divinity. I said, well, then what am I doing here? Why am I in the physical world? Why am I not in heaven? God said, you are in heaven. You're just not treating it as if it were heaven. And you've created your own personal hell, as have billions of other people who don't understand who they are and why they're here. And I said, well, then why am I here? Why am I here? God said, you're there to serve the agenda of your soul, which is to announce and declare, express and fulfill, become and experience through the demonstration thereof who you really are. But be careful. If you do that, you will change the world that you touch. And people might even make you wrong for it. They might even crucify you in their own way. So be very careful.
So how did you take that? Be careful. What did you do with that?
I moved forward with great care. I was careful. I didn't walk down the street. I didn't walk down the street declaring myself to be an individual expression of God. I didn't. I was very careful. And when I did explain what I understood to be true about myself and about all of us, I always made that very clear. I said, when the book became widely read, I was, of course, invited to give talks. And before I knew it, Again, I'm not bragging, just saying, but I wound up getting invited to talk everywhere from Buenos Aires to Germany. I was talking in France. I was invited to Russia. I was talking in Moscow, in Japan, in China. The Chinese government invited me to come and give talks there. I was talking all over the world. And I was saying to people, let's get very clear. All of us are individual expressions of the divine. And all of us are having our own conversations with God. We're simply calling it something else.
Yep.
Calling it a women's intuition.
Yeah. Channeling.
Or a psychic hit.
Yeah.
Or an epiphany. I had an epiphany. Mm-hmm. A sudden insight, whatever you want to use, whatever words you want to use in order to avoid saying, God told me this, because you don't want to be ridiculed and marginalized.
Yes.
But I was willing to suffer marginalization and ridicule because I wasn't going to call my experience something other than what it was. It was a conversation with God.
So since you've been in this for quite a while, so in our human perspective, quite a while, where do you see that humanity has made a shift towards this newer, I guess maybe it's newer, I don't know that it is, but a more collective understanding of this idea that you're presenting, which in my understanding, when I understood it, I was like, oh, it's always been there. In the Christian world, it's called the Holy Spirit. They just don't emphasize that part. They emphasize other parts. And
well, so sadly, many people in the Christian world, far too many from my observation, observe an idea that says, if you're a practicing Muslim, or a practicing Jew, or a practicing Hindu, or a practicing Buddhist, you're going to hell. Sorry to have to tell you, because God doesn't really care how good a person you are, how patient, how understanding, how compassionate, how forgiving you are. Doesn't matter to God. You either come through this doorway or you don't come at all. It's very simple. So you'd better show up Sunday for our service, or you're going to be in BT, big trouble. And I was raised as a Catholic. And in the Catholic Church, we were told that it was a mortal sin to miss Mass on Sunday.
Yeah.
If you miss Mass without a good excuse, fair enough if you're caring for a sick parent or you're an adult who has to work on Sunday to support your family, fair enough. But if you just decide, because a friend you haven't seen in 23 years shows up on your doorstep in a big surprise and says, let's go have brunch. I can't believe I haven't seen you in 23 years. Yeah, let's go have brunch. And you miss Mass that Sunday, the first Sunday of your life that you didn't go to Mass. The priest said to me, well, because I asked the priest about this, and he said, well, if you confess your sins and get absolution, you're okay. But if you don't, if you die before you confess that sin, you would be going to hell. I said, Father, let me understand. Are you saying I would be sent to everlasting damnation for missing a 45-minute Mass one Sunday in my life? He said, well, it's one of the 10 commandments. Keep the holy day. I said, wow, what an interesting God we have. Mm-hmm. What an interesting God who says in other religions, for instance, that you must cover your hair and cover your entire body, but only if you're a female. Mm-hmm. And you can only allow a certain slit in front of your garment so you can see where you're walking. Oh, and by the way, speaking of walking, you may not leave your house without being in the company of a male relative. These are the commands of this religion. This is the God that we believe in. Mm-hmm. Or the God of another religion who says, there's a certain kind of meat you can't eat. Mm-hmm. If you eat this particular kind of meat called pork, you're in trouble with God. let me see if I understand this. God cares what you wear and what you eat. I mean, please, really? This is the highest power in the universe who's concerned what John Schwarzkopf in Toledo, Ohio had for breakfast on Friday? I mean, come on. But billions and billions of people believe in that particular deity.
Mm-hmm.
So when I wrote, in Conversations with God, what I was told, Neale, I punish no one. I do not judge. I do not condemn. And I certainly do not punish. My love is pure love that needs, wants, expects, requires, and demands nothing in return. But this is hard for you to understand, Neale, because your species, you can't even love the person on the pillow next to you in that way. You can't honestly say to the person next to you, lying right there in bed with you, I don't require or need or expect or hope for or demand anything from you whatsoever. So you cannot imagine a God who loves you in that way. But when you decide that maybe there's something that you're not clear about, maybe there's more to this thing you call God than you have come to know. Maybe there's some data missing.
Yeah.
When you come to that understanding and decide what the missing data could or might be, it might change your entire experience of life. You might even love the person on the pillow next to you purely, without requiring anything in return, for the first time in your life. Wouldn't that be sweet?
I think that books like yours have really laid the groundwork for many people to open up to those ideas much earlier than, for example, in the 40s or the 60s when that kind of book wasn't available or it wasn't mass marketed.
Oh, it never had even been published.
Yeah, right, exactly. Would have never been published. But today we're experiencing, I mean, I have 2 children, and to listen to them, they skip over a lot of the things that, I had to deal with similarly to, there's probably some things that I understood. I mean, I totally resonate with what you're saying there. And I had friends growing up who were different races, different religions, and so forth. And so when I wasn't raised Catholic, so it wasn't like every Sunday. It just happened however it happened. And so when I heard things like that, you didn't come to church on Sunday, or you're not wearing the right clothes or whatever it is. And I'm friends with and love these people that I know who don't abide by that. I could never rectify that in my mind. Even though I didn't know what to say, I didn't have any other option to say, okay, well, I guess I'm not Christian. Now I can say that because I don't believe that one belief structure, because that's what I understand it to be, is you have to believe that this is the only way, or at least that's what the way it was presented to me. So.
I was taught as a child to even be embarrassed of my own body.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I remember when I was about 17, I did something very daring. I guess I was about 18. I did something very daring. I actually went to a nude beach.
Oh.
There was one in Southern California. You don't find them in every community, but there was one just near San Diego. It was a nude beach. And I went, I just wanted to see what that was all about.
Yeah.
There were all these naked people running around, swimming and lying on the sand.
Yeah.
And enjoying the sun. And I thought, I can't believe it. Oh my God, I can't. There are 165 naked people here. Right out here in the open on the beach. it was all I could do to take my clothes off and because I'd never done that before in my life.
Yeah.
I allowed myself to be seen by anybody, except maybe a sexual partner, and I didn't have many of those when I was 18. So it's kind of like, wow, we're supposed to even be embarrassed about our body. And embarrassed is not the same as being modest. Modest is one thing, embarrassed is something else entirely different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's to another degree.
So, golly gee, I think I've been asking my lecture audiences for the past 30 years, do you think it's possible, just possible, that there's something we don't fully understand here about God, about life, and about each other? The understanding of which would change everything.
Yeah. Well, even just the concept that we are all one, usually when people really get that on an energetic level, it shifts everything. Every way they speak, every word they speak, everything. Compassion just goes through the roof. And contentment too. I mean, that's a huge thing. Is it contentment? So
That's been my experience.
Speaking of the contentment, I'm curious, what has been your journey with so what you're describing, what we were just talking about, is what a lot of people would refer to nowadays as the 3D life, which involves the belief systems of culture. Okay, and which that includes the grander culture, but also our family dynamic or the close people around us. And when we start to release those things, which you have done so eloquently in those books, you ask the questions that help you to release those, then things begin to shift. But because we're people who are between this 3D belief structure and connected to spirit like this, we tend to waver back and forth. We tend to go back, but I have this belief. That one's true. I released all the other ones, but this one's still true. And so what we find, or what I have found, is that the 3D representation of our life, the physical manifestation of our life, sometimes is delayed from what it could be if you only approach it from a spiritual level. So maybe share with the audience, how did your 3D life shift when you made these shifts? When you started to understand these concepts, what happened in your 3D life?
First of all the stress and strain evaporated from my incessant focus on bigger, better, more. Need to get a bigger house, a better car, more of this, more. I need to make sure, I need to work for my financial security. I need to put together a retirement plan. I need to make sure everybody's taken care of, blah, blah, blah. So that was the first thing that changed was, I stopped paying most of my attention to those matters. I'm not saying I didn't pay any attention to it, because of course, as a practical person, I did, but they were way down on my priority list.
Okay.
What became first on my priority list, and at the top of that list, was not what am I doing, but how am I being. I realized, what God said to me. She said, Neale, you're not a human doing. You're a human being. So let me share with you the be, do, have paradigm. And she did. And he told me all about how I had everything in my life wrong, in the sense of it was inaccurate. It wasn't working. I thought that life worked out have, do, be. When I had this, then I can do this, then I can be this. Like when I have enough money, as an example, when I have enough money, I can do the thing called buy a house, and I can be the thing called safe and secure in my own home. When I have enough, when I have enough good grades, I can do the thing called graduate from college, and I can be the thing called ready for a career. And, whatever. It was a have, do, be paradigm. God said, no. It's the other way around. Be, do, have. Start off being what it is that you wish to be. And it was a whole brand new way for me of looking at life. And I even said to God, well, I don't understand. Like, for instance, if I want to be abundant, how can I be abundant if I'm jobless and I don't have any income? God said, oh, I see. You think abundance is dollars and cents. I see the challenge. But do your both hands work? Yes, ma'am. Does your body work? Yes, sir. Does your mind work? I think it does. I see. So what's the problem? You are abundant. Do you want to know how many people in the world do not have all those functions? Kneel down in gratitude for your abundance. And then be abundant. I said, I don't know. I said, this all sounds very nice, God. It's all very sweet. But frankly, I'm talking to God like I was talking to a friend. I said, frankly, it sounds a bit airy-fairy, a little bit airy-fairy. How can I get it down to earth? God said, if you really see yourself as abundant, share your abundance with others. Even what little money you have, if you only had $3 in your pocket. When you pass the guy on the street sitting up against a building with a little basket in front of him, with a cardboard sign in the basket that says anything helps, give him one of your $3. Or if you really want to be daring, give him all three. And watch how you feel when you walk away. Whether you feel abundant or lack. You will feel abundance, and that feeling will be projected from you out into the world and produce the outcome that you are feeling. My son, you just learned the first step in manifestation. And so, those are some of the ways in which my life changed dramatically.
So I understand you have a relatively new book. Would you like to share a little bit about that?
Sure. I have a book called God Talk,
okay,
which is about how people can have their own conversations with God. I didn't write it, just out of the blue. I got a telephone call, which rarely happens, by the way, in the publishing business. But in this case, the publisher called me. Most writers who have published books write a book and then they try to find a publisher. Maybe they have a literary agent who shops it around. They try to find a publisher. It's very rare for a publisher to call a person and say, would you write a book for us?
Uh-huh.
But I got a call, and some publisher said, would you be willing to write a book? I said, what about? Would you write a book and tell people how they can also have their own conversation with God? Mm-hmm. I said, sure, I'd be happy to. So I wrote a book, and they titled it God Talk. And the book explains how I went about my own conversation with God, and even outlined a little process, a little 6-step approach that people might use to have their own interaction with the divine. And then they put the book out. They put an internet invitation to people around the world saying, if you feel that you've also had an intervention with the divine, send us your story. And they called me and said, we're getting hundreds and hundreds of emails from people. So they took the 7 or 8 best of those stories and also included it in the book so that people wouldn't think that, there's this one guy out there in Oregon. Mm-hmm. They finally got the idea that, there are many, 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 many people all over the planet who experienced interventions, direct interactions with the divine. So they put those stories in the book as well. And they titled the book God Talk. I'm happy that they published it. And my other most recent book is a book called The God Solution, in which I talk about how a person could be an idea hero and place before humanity ideas that they know in advance most people will disagree with, maybe even ridicule them for. But they can be an idea hero like Galileo was an idea hero. He said the earth revolved around the sun. And of course, the church taught that the sun revolved around the earth at that time. And they condemned him and And it took them 363 years to admit that they were wrong. The church said, oh, I guess we had it wrong. And Galileo was right after all, back there in 1629.
Yeah.
So, the book God's Solution helps people to understand how they can manifest their reality. By the way, that particular book, I'm happy to make available to anyone who asks for it in a digital form. They simply drop me a note saying, Neale, send me a digital copy of the God's Solution at no cost. And I said, okay, I will. So if they drop me a note, you couldn't forget my email address if you tried, neale@nealedonaldwalsh.com, and ask for the God's Solution. And I'll send you by return email a digital copy of the author's manuscript of that book. Because I want everybody to embrace the God's Solution.
Well, there must have been some serious seeds planted with some of the work that you did, because we have shifted a lot as a community, I think even worldwide. I just before we met, I was chatting with somebody in South Africa, right? Like we're all connecting to each other. And it reminds me of the stories of the Navajo Indians here who I've heard somebody talk about, and I'm not a Native American, so I don't know this firsthand, but this makes a lot of sense, that the smoke signals that they were sending up was a signal to connect. And when they both connected, they could communicate. And so I think that your books have helped to lay the groundwork, break some of those paradigms and release them, and allow so many people to be able to do that. So
I think so. I don't want to brag about it, but I do think it's a practical matter that the books, there are 9 Conversations with God dialogue books. And I think, frankly, they did kick open the door.
Yeah.
It gave people permission to realize that they were also having those experiences. And now we can acknowledge it and embrace it and call it part of our own.
Well, I just want to add one thing here. I totally agree with you. There have been many other books as I grow more into this field, and I recognize there are lots of other books, and there are many books that are old. But what, again, I found to be really unique and extremely helpful about yours is that it spoke in a language that so many people understand and can resonate with, which is, I'm speaking to God. Maybe you in the book didn't speak to God in the way that they thought they were supposed to speak to God, but you did it, and you consistently got it. And on top of that, the messages that come through, anybody who's in this field knows when they're connecting to truth, when they're connecting to source, because the messages are consistent. They're consistent with everything you're saying here. And it's all about love, right? Like there's no punishment of some fabrication by a human. And so when you see that across the board, it's just, it's obvious. It's just very obvious when that comes through. And so I personally thank you. And I'm sure 1.5 million other people do too. But thank you for committing to that and sharing it with everybody and listening to that voice.
Thank you, Blair. Those are kind words to say. And I'm only humbly grateful that if something I've done in my life that I've been allowed to do has touched other people in a way that they feel has been beneficial. Thank you for saying that to me.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thank you for inviting me on the program. I've enjoyed being here with you. I hope it has served your agenda.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical and Infamous podcast with the Happy Lion Center. Send requests for topic discussions, questions, and comments to podcast@happylioncenter.com. That's podcast@happylioncenter.com.